With breakout players coming down to earth, certain names losing their volume, and guys just hitting their peak in value right now, we've got some deals to make. Let's go over these week 5 sells. We'll start with Cole Kmet. In a tight end market that is razor thin when it comes to consistency, there's a lot of draw here. After Kmet went from failing to score 10 points in 3 straight games, he exploded in week 4 and skyrocketed to the tight end 3 spot behind only TJ Hawkinson and Sam Laporta. That's ahead of more established names like Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews and members of a way better offense like Jake Ferguson. I don't think Kmet is bad by any means, but 2 touchdowns on 85 receiving yards for 27 fantasy points is sky high for somebody in an offense that has struggled all year. It's lightning in a bottle, really. He's tied with DJ Moore at 24 targets after being the Bears' lead pass catcher in 2022. But again, this offense is not good. The Bears put together 3 quarters of good football against the Broncos, a team that allowed 70 points in week 4 and was on pace to give up 40 plus to the Bears in week 5 before the collapse. I mean, for goodness sakes, the guy was wide open on 1 touchdown, and he literally stood still while his defenders sprinted towards Fields for the other touchdown. I honestly think Kmet finishes as a fringe top 10 tight end this year, considering that Chase Claypool, the wide receiver 2 on this team, is now being told not to report to team facilities this week. Not a great sign. But Kmet isn't being valued as just a top 10 tight end after that week 4 performance. He's being valued at much higher. Do yourself a favor and take advantage of that while you can. Raheem Mostert is my second sell option, and this one feels so good. When I saw him take off with a couple of touchdowns in week 2, I said the writing would soon be on the wall. Then he exploded in week 3. His value skyrocketed. But at the end of the day, here's what we have as he starts to come back down to earth. We have a 31-year-old injury-prone running back who has only played in 2 full seasons out of 8 tries. We already know about the shelf life situation when it comes to running backs past the age of 30. Mostert is also in an offense that is committed to the pass. And yes, that was inflated this week because the Bills nearly put up 50 on Miami. But the most concerning part of all this, he goes by the name of De'Von Achane. Not only is De'Von Achane literally the perfect mold to be the lead back of a team that is built on sheer speed, but Achane is already getting the ball more than Mostert. I know this past week was just 1 game, but De'Von Achane has 33 touches in the last pair of games while Mostert is at 30. And he's averaging a ridiculous 11.7 yards per carry in that time span as well. Oh yeah, and somehow I've gone all this way without mentioning that Jeff Wilson Jr. should be activated from the IR any week now. From one running back to another, I am selling high on Derrick Henry after what he did this last week. The high volume and 4th passing touchdown of his career were all fun, but it doesn't cover the fact that Henry is far less efficient in 2023 and is just a couple of months away from being 30 years old himself. He's just sitting at 3.9 yards per carry through 4 games so far. He's also extremely game script dependent. In the 2 losses for the Titans so far, Henry was in for just 48% and 38% of snaps, a concerningly low mark considering how high he was being drafted. Speaking of snaps, 3rd round rookie Tyjae Spears was in for 53% of snaps in Tennessee's victory over Cincinnati in week 4. And for the 3rd time in 4 weeks, he averaged greater than 6 yards per carry. Henry once again looks to be a traditional ground and pound running back as he has just 6 catches on 8 targets through 4 weeks. So what I'm saying about him especially applies in standard PPR leagues. I'd say he holds a bit more value in standard and half PPR formats. Package Henry with another piece and go get someone younger, more efficient, or even with more pass catching upside like Tony Pollard or DeAndre Swift. Romeo Doubs has gotten off to a hot start in a Packers offense where we really didn't know what to expect. Now, Christian Watson and Aaron Jones did come back in the week 4 matchup against the Lions, and I know what a lot of you are going to say. Doubs played through that, Corey, yet he's still had 8 more targets than anybody else with 13. That may be true, but look just a bit deeper. Christian Watson was in for just 46% of snaps. Despite that, Watson had the lone receiving touchdown on the day. Now, Doubs actually had more targets in less games than Watson in 2022, but Christian Watson goes vertical and averages much more per catch. Watson also wasn't even a part of this Packers offense until almost halfway through the season. The same story applies to Aaron Jones. He was in for just 35% of snaps this week. And he had more targets than Watson and Doubs last year as a veteran on this offense. I think that Doubs will still have an impact on a team targeting receivers greater than 68% of the time. That's among the highest rates in the league. But don't count on him being 15 fantasy points per game good. Next is Kyle Pitts. This is sheer popularity play here, folks. Kyle Pitts is one of the only players in the NFL who in year 3 still holds so much value in the eyes of the fantasy football community because of his collegiate profile and his rookie year where he hit over 1,000 yards. There are a few things holding Kyle Pitts back here. One is quarterback play. Last year, he had a 59% catchable ball rate, down from the 79% league average, meaning Marcus Mariota and then Desmond Ridder didn't give this guy a chance. Well, this year, and yes, it is a small sample size, we're only a fourth of the way home, he has a 57% catchable ball rate. It's getting worse. This man doesn't even have a chance on half of the passes thrown in his direction. Desmond Ridder had a horrible game against the Jaguars with errant throw following errant throw. Another issue is sheer volume. This Falcons team throws the ball just over 51% of the time. That is one of the lowest marks in the entire NFL. And we expected that because the Falcons ran the ball more than all teams not named the Bears last year. And then they got Bijan Robinson, who also takes up receiving volume, by the way. What we didn't expect was for Kyle Pitts to be the second most effective tight end on his own team. Jonnu Smith is seeing more checkdowns and high percentage throws, leading to a much higher catch percentage. Well, at least the 6'6" tight end in Pitts leads his position in red zone targets, right? No, Jonnu Smith has covered that too. Pitts is owned in more leagues than the following names who have him beat in fantasy points per game so far: Sam Laporta, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, Dalton Schultz, Tyler Higbee, David Njoku, Jake Ferguson, who you should add right now considering he's at the top of the league in red zone targets, yet is owned in less than 40% of leagues, and many others, so the hype has not died enough for Kyle Pitts to be dropped, clearly. Sell this guy to a league mate who still has hope that Kyle Pitts will break out, because I've got him in fantasy jail. Jahan Dotson is in an offense that I have avoided in every draft I have done unless I saw an insane value in 2023. You simply cannot predict, even semi-accurately, who is going to get the bulk of the volume on this offense on a week-by-week basis. The Commanders are a nightmare for fantasy right now. Dotson had a stint last year between weeks 13 and 16 where he was the main man. He scored in the double digits and had a touchdown in each of those 3 games. There was a bye week in there. That led to him going in mid to late rounds of most of your drafts this year. Well, this year he was yet to do either of those things until week 4 against the Eagles, and it took a literal last-second touchdown as time expired to send the game to overtime. Despite the fact Dotson has the second most amount of targets on the team with 25, he's hardly over 100 receiving yards. His target share is hung at or below the 20% mark so far, and that's because Sam Howell has given 7 different receivers at least a pair of targets per game. He is now dealing with an ankle injury as well. Stick that on top of volume competition, but consider the hype that Jahan Dotson built up after having the most receiving touchdowns on Washington last year, and you have baked yourself a perfect sell candidate. Courtland Sutton is another wide receiver on an offense that clearly still needs a lot of work. They stalled until the second half against a Bears defense that has given up 35 points per game going into that matchup. The Bears were missing their number 1 corner in Jalen Johnson, with the Broncos being behind nearly the entire game. That obviously warranted a throw-heavy scheme, which is favorable for wide receivers in fantasy. Even after all of those favorable conditions transpired, Sutton had a whopping 11.7 points, and he needed a touchdown to do it. He's had 3 total touchdowns in 4 weeks, which 9.9 times out of 10 is not a sustainable pace over the course of an entire season. The Broncos only ran 47 plays, and Sutton has hit the double digits in each of the first 4 weeks. However, you can argue that his ceiling is mitigated heavily with him being in such a poor offense. He has the most targets on a relatively pass-heavy team so far, but Jerry Jeudy still demands roughly 6 targets per game in a more down-the-field fashion. And speaking of down the field, Marvin Mims Jr. has racked in 5 of his 9 receptions for a gain of at least 20 yards. Alexander Mattison is our final sell candidate of this video, and I truly believe he may be at the peak of his value. He has been efficient over the course of the last 2 weeks, but when Cam Akers was ready to get out of Los Angeles, the Vikings pounced and scooped him up right away. He made his debut this past week, and while Mattison won the touches game by a wide margin, Cam Akers was more involved than any secondary back has been for Minnesota so far. Akers was in the game for 29% of snaps, while Ty Chandler's season high in that mark was 27% through 3 games. So Cam Akers, who has been a member of the Vikings for all of a week and a half heading into this last Sunday, already has partaken in an increased amount of snaps for that secondary role. Now, what did he do about it? Well, he took 5 rushes for 40 yards and had a pair of targets to Madison's 1. I'm not here trying to convince you that Cam Akers takes the running back 1 job, at least right away, but it's like a Najee Harris and Jalen Warren situation. There's somebody else with a disruptive role taking up opportunity in the rushing and receiving game to an extent that fantasy content creators like myself feel that it's worth mentioning them. Thank you so much for watching. As always, feel free to ask any questions that you may have in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if we're helping you out in fantasy football heading into week 5, and we will see you in the next video.